Welcome to another episode of the Plutus Awards Podcast. Our community is filled with hundreds of stories from creators and entrepreneurs just like you. And through this show, we share these stories of challenges and successes, from bloggers to podcasters to writers, speakers, and more. Today's guest is Jessica, also known as Mrs. Fioneer. Jessica is the co-founder of the website The Fioneers, a financial independence blog focused on the intersection between financial independence and lifestyle design. By day, Jessica is an HR manager at a nonprofit organization. We talk about why Jessica is quitting her nonprofit job as we speak before she felt ready, how she's preparing for the change, including structuring her finances, and how she's tapping into an abundance mindset to give her the confidence to make the leap. Let's dive right into my conversation with Jessica. Jessica, welcome to the Plutus Awards Podcast. I'm really excited for today's conversation.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you too.
There are a lot of really wonderful conversations about people who quit their jobs, but they're more reflecting on their situation from a few years ago. So it would be really nice to hear your perspective because you are literally just about to quit your job, or you have quit your job. So tell me about the job that you're leaving and a little bit about what led to that decision.
I'm not quite done yet. Next Thursday is actually my last full day working. And then after that, I'll be working 10 hours a week through the beginning of January to wrap up a couple of projects. Right now, I work for a nonprofit organization that works in like the economic empowerment asset building space, which is something that I really am passionate about and really care about and is really aligned with my personal mission. I guess there's a few reasons why I've decided that I want to sort of move on. I think one of them is just that I started a coaching business earlier this year, and that's been taking off more quickly than I expected it to. And I've seen a track record of success so far and expectations that it will continue to grow. That gives me the confidence to take the leap. The second thing is that currently in my job, I work part-time. I work 3 days a week. So that's been great to be able to have the time to build up the business and write the blog. But I was starting to get to a point where I felt like I had more projects that I wanted to be doing that I didn't have enough time for. I think that most people probably feel that way. I actually didn't at the beginning because I was only working 3 days a week. I think there was that piece of it that I'm just like excited to sort of take the next steps and like do some of those projects that I'm really interested in. And then the final piece, and I would say it was just like the final push, was that like I had a couple of frustrating weeks at work. I think previously I had been thinking I'll get to a point where I'm covering my full expenses and then I'll quit. And I was expecting that to be maybe next summer. I had a couple frustrating weeks at work. I realized that I was like, I'm having more frustrating days than I'm having good days. I did a financial projection of what I would expect to generate in income for 2021. It more than covered my salary. And then I was like, oh, do I want to quit yet? And then it was really helpful for my husband to look at it and be like, so do you want to quit? And it felt like that question almost gave me the permission that I needed. Like I just needed someone else in my life to be like, do you want to quit right now? And then I was like, oh, that is an option. Yes, I do. Let me think. I was like, I don't know. And then let me think through it. And then I got to a point where I was like, yeah, I do. And then gave my notice within a couple of days of that decision.
I love that term, financial projection. And I want to get back to the piece about permission, but let's talk about financial projection first. So what were the kind of nitty gritty things that you did? Obviously, it's a spreadsheet because we're all money nerds around here. Let's be honest, right? But what were the exact things that you put into this spreadsheet or whatever it was you used to be able to project that?
I did a couple of things. I think on the coaching side, I sort of mapped out throughout the year, like how often I would be launching, since I do group coaching programs. So how often would I be launching those group coaching programs? What was I planning to charge for them? How many groups was I likely to fill? And would I be able to fill, especially if I did not have the burden of the time doing the work, the part-time work? on top of it. So there was that piece of it of sort of mapping it out and mapping out other like smaller programs or courses that I now will hopefully will have time to put together. And then beyond that, so most of the income comes from the coaching and courses. Some of the income does come from the blog. So what I did was I sort of did a really conservative projection of how much money we made on the blog in 2020 and sort of extrapolated that to next year, expecting that that will likely at least stay the same or grow, given that we continue to grow our readership.
What were some of the things, or what are some of the things that you want to do? Because you mentioned, like, I'm hitting a wall where I don't have the time to do these projects. What were they?
I have a few ideas. So one of them is I actually have a number of people, especially when I do workshops or presentations, who want to have support working through scarcity mindset. And I feel like that's something that I've done, and I imagine we're going to talk through as part of this interview. I have a vision to do like maybe a mini course that might be like 3 or 4 live sessions, at least for the first time, of like working through both the financial side of the scarcity mindset, as well as sort of the like building that abundance mindset and sort of shifting that as well. I tend to see that a lot of people also have made requests around doing work around boundaries and boundary setting. So that's something that I'm considering doing as well, and something that I'm pretty passionate about and feel like I've gotten to a good place in my own life of being able to set really clear boundaries. And so feel like that's something that I can bring to other folks. So those are 2 of the ideas. I have like another idea that like maybe I'll create a weekly planner, like notebook or something like that. That seems pretty fun. And with the coaching that I'm doing, it's around lifestyle design and working toward your sort of ideal life and your goals. And so I do provide resources like that to the people who I work with. So pulling that together into some sort of like notebook could be neat.
We definitely will talk about scarcity mindset. So this question is related to that. Is you said when you looked at your financial projection, the first question or a question that popped to your mind was like, can I quit? But that almost sounded like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded like you didn't want to give yourself permission, or you almost didn't know how to give yourself permission until someone else did. So can you unpack that a little bit?
It's interesting because all of this stuff is really hard. And I find that like I tend to be a pretty risk averse person, and I always want things to be like perfectly in order. And my original plan, right, was to say like once I can cover my full income, then I will take the leap, which looking back I realized wasn't really necessary, but that was my mindset, was I can't do this until I'm able to cover my full expenses, which I was guessing would be sometime within the next year, but not yet. And then I had a couple of friends that I do a mastermind with who were like, so would you consider quitting earlier? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, that's a good question to think about. I need to think about it, and I need to talk to my husband about it because I know he tends to be fairly risk averse as well. When he saw the spreadsheet and he was like, so do you want to quit? I was like, okay, this isn't going to really take convincing. And if there's someone in my life who's more risk averse than me, typically, who's asking me and like basically saying like, this is an option to think about right now, I was like, great. There was that mental block for me of saying, I need to be there before I can take a leap. I felt like I had people in my life who were able to like help lower that barrier for me, which was really helpful. But even when he asked, I was like, oh, I don't know. Let me think about it. And then I did spend some time like journaling and really thinking about what I wanted, and then came back to make the decision together.
What were some of the insights that you had while you were journaling about this?
The first thing that I was thinking about was the financial side. I had the projections. Once you have the numbers in front of you, I feel like things are easy. Things are easier, at least once you have the numbers in front of you and you've built yourself to a level of financial freedom. Like I saw a quote yesterday. I can't remember who it was from, but it was basically like, these things don't require courage. They just require money, moving or taking a new job or quitting a job without a backup. And I was like, well, yes, they do require money and they require courage. It's both. It isn't just all of a sudden, if someone has the financial means to support that decision, that it'll be easy to make it. For me, I think it was thinking through and working through some of this beyond the numbers of building that abundance mindset of saying like, well, what? I started thinking about like, well, what are the consequences if this doesn't work? I tend to think about like worst case scenario, which I think is okay. I think it's actually helpful because my worst case scenarios are usually fairly realistic. And then I can like think through what would I do if that happened? And then it usually makes me less anxious. For me, it made me think through, well, if this doesn't work as much as we expected to or as quickly as we expected to, there's options. I could generate income doing something slightly different on the side, build up another side hustle or business or something like that. Or I could get another part-time job or do contract or freelance work in the field that I'm leaving. I realized there's options that are still open to me if I need them. And then it was amazing. It was like light bulb moment for me to be like, on this list of things, the worst case scenario is getting another part-time job. It's not even getting a full-time job. That was really helpful for me. From there, then I took some time to think through like, well, what are some of the inputs or like the intermediary outputs maybe instead of just outcomes? So like, what are the indications that this is something that will be successful in 2021, right? And so I looked at that we've roughly quadrupled our email list in the last 6-7 months, that I'm increasing the number of people who are attending workshops and the percentage of people who are contacting about coaching and like that kind of thing. And so seeing some of those sort of inputs and medium term outputs make me feel comfortable enough. Like, so that was sort of the thought process of taking the leap, was feeling like I knew what I would do if the worst case scenario happened. And two, that I felt confident that I could trust the process and trust myself because of the success and because of the work and inputs that were going into it.
So it's almost like proving to yourself that what you've done and what you're going to do is going to help you be successful or help you basically earn the projections that you've set for yourself.
Yeah.
Awesome. That sounds great. I am interested in the abundance mindset part of this because it sounds like what you were describing is a way to cultivate that. I would love to hear some of the techniques that you've incorporated from things that you've coached your clients on, or the things that you are excited to try to incorporate into your routine, I guess, or habits in terms of further cultivating an abundance mindset in your new full-time venture in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. The first one that we can talk about is like, it's really, really hard to build an abundance mindset if you don't really understand like the foundation of what the numbers mean. And I think that I would say we need to build an abundance mindset, especially if we have abundance, but we perceive to have scarcity. I think that's where a lot of us are who are in like the content creation space, at least when people are getting started. And especially people in the financial independence space tend to be very risk averse and sort of scarcity oriented, which is why people are trying to save so much so that they can retire early and never have to work again by 30, right? And not believing that like you'll maybe want to generate income later doing things that you want. For me, it was a process of understanding not only like what the numbers are. So how much in the emergency fund do I have? How much do I have saved in investments? But understanding what they mean. For me, thinking about it in terms of FU money. So being like, great, I have this emergency fund and it is a pot of FU money that can allow me to get out of a toxic situation without worrying about the financial ramifications or take advantage of an opportunity. For me, realizing that like that's what the money is for, is to either get out of that situation or to take advantage of an opportunity. The second one for me was understanding and sort of relearning, I guess, the idea of compound interest and understanding the concept that we call coast-fi, understanding that once we've gotten to a point where like our traditional retirement is set, we've saved enough that we could not add any more money to retirement, but it'll continue to grow and provide us with a comfortable traditional retirement. So what we need to do is just cover our actual expenses. That's helpful for me to say, okay, do I feel confident that I can cover my actual expenses for the next several years? Even if it's hard, I do feel confident in that. I know that there's so many people who are braver than me, right? Who take a leap to entrepreneurship or freelance work when they're still paying off debt and they're still building their emergency funds. And I feel like we should definitely learn about abundance mindset from those folks too, because in that sense, I want to learn from them. Right? Is how can someone build that abundance mindset without actually having the financial pieces in place to easily support that? Beyond that, I think there's a couple of like mindset shifts and like things that I try to remind myself of. And sometimes it's just recognizing when there's a limiting belief that's coming up of saying like, well, I should hold on to my job until I can cover my full income, right? Whereas like that's one to say, well, if I hold tight to something that's like not working and isn't great, that's keeping me from being able to like have space in my life for something better. There's so many examples and I'm starting to like see these in my own life and actually like believe they're possible. When you actually let go of something, you make space for something else, to a new opportunity to come in. And I've seen that in my life and other people's life, and even with that, it's still hard to like let go and take those steps and sort of trust that the next thing will come. I think one other piece around mindset for me, I think is like believing that I deserve to be happy, that I deserve to make money. I think that was something that definitely held me back early in my career. I think I had this weird skewed perspective from religious upbringing that like I should self-sacrifice my own happiness and my own money to support others. There's a grain of truth to that, but I think the way that I learned it and the way that I internalized it was to take it to a pretty extreme approach. I think one thing that I've learned over the last couple of years is that really the way that I truly can help the people in my community the best is by filling myself up to a place that I'm overflowing rather than feeling like I'm constantly giving away my last drop.
That's really powerful. I want to go back to when you were talking about when you let something go, it opens room for things to happen or things to come, and you've seen that in your own life. I am curious, as soon as you made that decision, you're like, I'm going to quit. And even walking up to your employer, be like, okay, well, this is, you made your arrangements to basically phase yourself out. Anything happen? Anything special happen?
So small things, maybe not any like super big things yet. I think one was that I felt like my mind opened up and I was like, oh my gosh, I have so many ideas. And I stayed up until 3 a.m. one day because I was just so excited. And I was just like writing down just idea after idea of things that I wanted to focus on. I think that had felt like, well, I don't have time. So I'm going to like push the ideas down. So there was that piece of it. I think the other one was that I was planning on just saying like, hey, I'm going to be done on XYZ date. I had previously been like, wouldn't it be great if I could continue working 10 hours a week or something if I wanted to? It's great to get to a place where I'm the one with the power in the situation and then being like, we'll take whatever you'll give us. And I'm like, great, I'll give you 10 hours a week through January. And then I'm going to see how it feels. And if it feels great and I want to keep doing it, and I might, because I think the organization does really incredible work. And if I can do the kind of work that I'm interested in, then I would love to keep working 10 hours a week as long as I could keep this up. So I do feel like that's a potential opportunity that's opened up as a result of it as well.
That is awesome. I will share mine. A week after I gave in my notice, I lost 3 of my main clients, and I thought I made the biggest mistake of my life. So the opposite can happen. But I will say I gained some clients a few weeks afterwards. So it's just really, I'm always so interested to hear about what happens when kind of a major life decision or transition's made, like what happens. And and I love what you said about like, you stayed up till 3 a.m. because it's almost like another thing that you're giving yourself permission to do is to generate more ideas because you realize, okay, well, now I have more time. I can indeed do this. I don't want to feel disappointed if I write all these ideas and I can't do them. I do want to transition to that where you talked about I deserve to be happy. And I would love for you to unpack that in terms of even ramping up your side hustle and then leading up to all of this income and now quitting.
I think it's been a journey over the last couple of years. I think 3 years ago at this time, I was in like a really bad space with my mental health. So experiencing a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, but feeling like I have a better life than many people in the world. So like why do I get to focus on it? I should be focusing on helping others, right? Which is part of why I've always worked in nonprofit and had a really mission focused career. I think some things shifted for me in the last couple of years. So one of them was my last job that I left in 2018 was pretty toxic. And I took a lot of responsibility for like changing things and like things that were totally not under my control. But I felt like I'm this privileged white woman who comes from like upper middle class and feeling like I am so privileged that like I need to just give. And I did, right? Until I got to a point where I literally could not give anything else. I woke up at 3 a.m. having a panic attack that lasted for multiple hours and like never went back to that job. I ended up thinking like, I'll take a couple days off and then I'll take a couple weeks off. Ended up going on a disability and taking about 6 months off before I decided to actually quit the job. I think during that time, I had a lot of learning and really unlearning to do about who I was, what I deserve. There was a lot of cognitive dissonance because I didn't really believe, like I didn't always believe it, but I knew, and I was like taking the advice of others that like I needed to focus on myself and I needed to like break out of this cycle that I was in of burnout, depression, recovery, burnout, depression, recovery. And I like really actually broke out of the cycle this time, not just getting back to my like baseline that wasn't good, but actually like changed some perspectives on in order to be kind to others, I need to be kind to myself first. And I think part of it is actually experiencing it, right? Like I could say all of those things, but I think I like after actually recovering from burnout fully for I think the first time probably in my life, I realized that I had so much more energy and so much more to give. And I was so much happier. I won't go back to that space because I have now experienced that I actually am able to do so much more in the world because I'm taking care of myself.
Your plans moving forward. What I'm really interested in is when people usually enter full-time self-employment right after they quit, they feel like, oh, I gotta go, do all the things, implement everything I want to do. And then there can be a period of burnout. I know I experienced it. I know many others have. So of course you don't want to go back to that because you've been there. So what are some steps that you are taking to ensure that, okay, I'm still cultivating that abundance mindset. I'm still going to ensure that I'm doing things where I deserve to be happy, but not push yourself to the point of burnout.
Part of it for me is I've already been thinking about what do I want my day-to-day schedule to look like, and figuring out like what do I think is my ideal amount of working. And for me, I feel like ramping up a little bit in the number of hours that I'm working is, in terms of the number of hours that I'm spending on the business, I think will happen. I would say I'm probably spending about 20 hours a week on it. And I may ramp that up a little, but I don't think I'm going to fully replace the hours of my part-time work, at least for a while, and hopefully not ever. I think, and I'm figuring out like, okay, what are my best times of day to do work and like do the stuff that's like really the brain heavy work that I'm going to do, like late mornings and early afternoons, and make sure I have slow mornings with recovery activities and things like that. So that's part of the focus. I think for me, part of it is building a community of people who are able to also hold you accountable and to be able to see when you might be trying to do too much, right? And I have a mastermind group that I'm a part of that is really open. I have an accountability partner who's another blogger and coach who we have lunch once a week and are really able to support each other in that way, as well as a therapist who will be really honest with me and say, hey, you need to slow down if I feel like I need to, or if it seems like that I need to. But I do feel like over the years, I've built up the level of mindfulness and self-awareness that I'm hoping that I'm able to see that on my own if I need to.
What are you nervous about after the last day at your job?
What am I nervous about? I'm not sure there's things to be right? There's definitely things to be nervous about. I do feel like I'm more excited. The things that I'm nervous about, I'm working through. There's a couple that I'm like, I actually feel like I like structure. And so I want to figure out what's the structure that works for me. I've been thinking about that a lot because going from having a structure of working full days, 3 days a week to no structure could be a challenge for me. That's one thing. I think another thing that I've been thinking about is, will I have enough community and people that I'm connecting with? But I've been figuring out ways to improve that. So, like the mastermind that I'm a part of is going to start meeting more often. And then I joined a couple of other online communities. So, I'm going to go out of my way to connect with people. I feel like there's things I'm nervous about, but I'm like already taking steps to make sure that it'll be less painful to make that transition.
Okay, fast forward to a few years later. Where do you envision yourself being in terms of your business?
I think there's a number of different directions that it could go. One thing that I'm excited about is I'm planning to start a membership for people who've gone through my 2 programs. So my first program is focused on lifestyle design generally. And then the second program is focused on, okay, let's implement your plans. I want to start a membership with people who've gone through both of those programs that has like a mastermind component and some planning sessions throughout the year. I think one of my long-term goals is I want to run retreats to be able to, I think, run like an annual planning retreat with that group of people who's in the mastermind membership would be awesome. I would love that. I feel like I've gotten to this point where I've been reading books in the last several months, and my mind is like, you could write a book, or like, you could write this. which is interesting because that was not a feeling that I've had before the last several months. But I think that could be something that happens in my future as well. In addition to doing some more maybe like on-demand courses and figuring out ways to get the message and the work out to people, to a wider group and a larger group of people, even if they can't work with me one-on-one or in the small group setting.
Before I let you go, Jessica, where can everyone find you and your work?
You can find me on thefioneers.com. It's pioneers, but with an F at the beginning. And then I'm on Twitter and Instagram at the Fioneers. And then we have a Facebook community for people who are interested in lifestyle design. And you can find that at thefioneers.com/FB for Facebook.
Awesome. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let's take a look at some lessons we can learn from my conversation with Jessica. Lesson number 1 is your finances will never be enough. And by that, I mean, no matter what goal you're setting for yourself, maybe you're trying to earn a certain amount of income in your business before you feel comfortable to make the leap, or you want to have a certain amount in your emergency fund, that number can go bigger. So let's say you wanted to have $10,000 in your emergency fund. If you reach that amount and you're still too nervous about making the leap, you might be tempted to tell yourself, oh, maybe I need a bigger emergency fund before I do so. So the point is to get yourself where you're confident enough or you have enough money to cover those basic necessities and then follow through with what you say you're going to do when you reach that point. Lesson number 2 is to plan for the worst case scenario. Now, as we know from recent events, we never know what's going to happen, especially our income sources and especially our businesses. So Jessica, as you heard in the conversation, has planned for the worst case scenario. So luckily for her, her husband still has some form of steady income. She can probably still go back to her nonprofit, or in her case, she said that the worst case scenario is to get a part-time job. So if you're feeling a lot of anxiety pursuing your business full-time, then plan for what you think might happen. What if you don't make income for a few months? What do you need to do? What if you have to pivot your business model like so many people had to do during the pandemic? What are you going to do? Writing those down and having a plan in place is going to really help you with your anxiety, whether or not you have to execute those plans. Lesson number 3, and perhaps the most important one, is you deserve to be happy. And I love this point that Jessica made about you deserve to be happy. At the end of the day, you want to do work that's meaningful. Of course, that can earn you some great money and provide for yourself and your family. But ultimately, your pursuit in whatever job you want to do, right? What kind of business you want to do is to give yourself some version of happiness. So keep telling yourself that you deserve to be happy and let that abundance mindset cultivate and manifest. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening to the Plutus Awards Podcast. If you're interested in collaborating with other financial bloggers, podcasters, influencers, and more to chat about your work, interests, ask and answer questions, come join our Facebook community. Search for Plutus Community in the search bar or head to facebook.com/groups/Plutus Community. We hope to see you there and get a chance to support you and your amazing work.